So I think the thing I really want to start with is the fact that I have been spoiled by two games, and I feel like potentially a third. I don't know what its bosses are like, but I have been spoiled. I feel by Final Fantasy XIV. Welcome to the game that I'm currently playing, and I've
Yes.
also been spoiled by Undertale.
Right.
And that's because I feel like their bosses are designed with the idea of not just being HP soaks.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
That's the
And
fundamental design. You don't know much about. Pardon me. You don't know much about Final Fantasy XIV. I know that much. But
well, I do know that you were showing me those Final Fantasy XIV boss
yeah,
guides,
exactly.
and you had to really know a specific strategy to dodge their attacks and then what attacks you use on them and whatnot.
The attacks you use on them aren't the bigger deal in Final
But
Fantasy
yeah, it's all
XIV.
about because they. Well, yeah, there was this one video you showed me, and I don't know what boss it
Yeah,
was
it's
or
alright.
anything. But there was the they had about 15 different attacks and describing all their effects, and they all do weird stuff on you, and so
Move
you
into
really need to
position for this
know that,
one.
and then battle in that specific way in order to beat the boss.
Mm.
It's actually probably one of the least attended to features of a game in a lot of
Yeah,
RPG
exactly.
games,
And
because a lot of bosses in a lot of RPGs aren't that great.
no, they're
It's
just
probably
fucking
Persona
HP sucks.
5's like Persona 5, even though it's overall a very good game,
Persona 5 is just
its weakest part.
it's the absolute minimalist of this. It's like you throw one item, the boss is vulnerable.
Well, yeah, like Persona 5's weakest thing mechanically is the bosses because, well, there's the one item thing, but other than that, they are just HP soaks.
Well,
Um,
no, they all have a mechanic that you can
well,
attempt to
yeah,
do.
but
Like you can
yeah,
paint over what's his face's fucking floating painting pictures, and
yeah, but
you can
it could have
steal his
still been
crown.
done a lot more. It could have been given a lot more thought.
And
And
and in the contrast to that, Undertale's bosses and even its random encounters are all based around how you act towards an enemy. Act, ha, get it? Act.
but yes, exactly.
And it it becomes much more about your strategy. Like the bosses in particular, because they have all these unique ways that they're you're blue now, uh,
Yeah,
changing the color of your heart to perform all these different unique actions. Especially when it culminates in a crazy boss fight like the end of the Genocide Run. I don't know
yeah.
how much you know about the Genocide Run or like the second
I
half
haven't
of.
completed it.
So, do you know
Um,
who the final boss is?
I haven't actually completed any of the stories in Undertale, but um, I have played the bosses in the normal run.
Okay,
I
so
don't know how far I got in the genocide run. Actually,
fair enough.
I don't think
The
I did. I
Genocide
don't
Run's
think I
gonna
got
kick your
past
ass.
the Pyrus anyway.
The
So I probably
He's not a boss in the Genocide Run, to be fair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's
Well, there you
he's
go.
one of the people that you emotionally kill in one hit.
Oh, right.
There's a few
So
bosses
he's a
like that.
cutscene. I suppose Undyne would be a boss though.
Yes, Undyne is a genocide boss, and basically the arrow thing that you have to do for her in pacifist slash well,
Yeah,
pacifist slash neutral, it's that up to like 17,000. Like even the first
yeah,
attack is
right.
just like the four slow
So they're
vertical
really,
ones.
really hard bosses because they hate your guts and they want you to die.
Yeah,
So they're
but
trying their hardest to kill you.
even when the whole point of the game is the genocide run and to get as much experience as possible and to, you know, to fucking get
Yeah.
as much like even the point of like playing the game like a true to form RPG, it still makes the bosses really interesting and like complicated. Like having the fucking
Well, yeah.
having
Well,
Undyne's arrow
Toby
thing.
Fox's. Well, yeah, Toby Fox's simple idea of that arrow thing with the box and dodging the attacks adds so much depth to bosses.
Oh
And so
yeah.
he could literally make a he could literally make just new ideas for that concept, and it would make a whole new boss.
There's
It's
there's a fundamental similarity between both Undertale's enemy turn phase and the bosses in Final Fantasy XIV. Do you know what it is, Patrick?
no, I don't know that much about Final Fantasy.
Adding the player, well, you do. Adding the player's position on the battlefield is a key to their survivability.
Oh, of course, yeah. Because you
move
not just
to dodge.
turn by turn.
Yeah, you move to dodge stuff
Yeah.
in Final Fantasy XIV. It's also more complicated than that. You know, you drop something that's placed on you far away from everyone else so it doesn't hurt them or whatever, etc., etc. But you move to drop stuff in Final Fantasy XIV. You move to dodge stuff, sorry, in Final Fantasy XIV, and you move to dodge stuff in Undertale.
Yeah, the dodging is just as part of the battle
Yeah,
as
and I
as
really,
every.
really want to incorporate that into like Deus somehow.
It's like making a 3D thing 4D.
Yeah, well, it'd be a much easier to describe. One would be like making a 2D thing 3D.
Well, yeah, but it adds another dimension. It's probably what I should have said.
Yeah, it's alright. I understood what you meant. I really, really
Yeah.
want to add something like that to Deus, or build Deus around that, is what I should say, not just add something to Deus.
Right.
That wasn't a grinder
So-
notification, shut up.
But yeah, I really don't know what you were actually using because you've proposed so many systems in the past.
I know. It's ridiculous. Are we
So
doing
I don't actually
turn-based?
like.
Are
Are
we
you
doing...
just using the turn-based battle? In that case, I don't know.
The
what
ironic
you could do in
The ironic
turn-based.
conversation is that the turn-based versus action battle-based is actually still the open conversation, even if I wanted to use some form of, like, handling of mechanics. Because, like, obviously there are two fantastic games that we've been talking about that have both done it in the exact two different ways. Undertale does it in
Yeah.
a turn-based way, and Final Fantasy XIV does it actively juggles you dodging and performing mechanics as well as attacking the enemy.
Yeah. So yeah.
So
What
we
I,
still have both options, ironically enough.
Well, what I also just remembered is,
Mhm.
do you remember Legend of Dragoon, where you had to press the right buttons
You had,
to land your attack?
you had.
I do wonder. I'd imagine like it would be easy to implement, even though it's not quite the same thing. It would be interesting to implement a similar system. You could do some button combination in time to dodge an attack or guard against an attack. So
possibly,
it could at least add something.
possibly.
If we build on an idea like that, that might make something.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like too bad, but like, for Legend of Dragoon, it became fairly monotonous to perform editions, especially the longer ones when you get into the second and when you get into later parts of the game, because the only good editions are the ones that hit.
Because with every attack, you had to do that.
And so that's also why I think we should relegate the bosses to do these specific mechanics. But even then, like, it's
Not
interesting.
battles.
It's interesting because in Final Fantasy XIV and in Undertale, even
Yeah.
the basic enemies have like strategies.
those
They're just
things,
much.
so-
They're just much more reduced. You know,
Yeah,
fucking hug the
like
volcano and she loves you. Like,
yeah. Well,
And-
that's true. So those systems would actually be good enough that you can use them in all battles. Which signifies how good those ideas
because
are.
that system is scalable. I think that's another important factor, right? Like,
Yeah,
having additions for every fight is not scalable, right? Not
Yeah.
really. I mean, you make the enemies weaker than the bosses. Surprise, surprise, you've developed an RPG. But, like, the system itself is not scalable, whereas mechanics for small enemies where you dodge the you dodge the orange symbol on the ground once, and then you kill them, and you do one act and then you spare them, versus mechanics for bosses where you have to constantly juggle, like, sparing this character while dodging their complex fucking fireball twisties. Or, like, where you have to do these 5 different mechanics while keeping in mind the next mechanics for Final Fantasy XIV. While DPSing. Like, you know, it's totally scalable. I think there's also something else to think about, though, and that is that a lot of the bosses that we talk about when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV are 100%, like, scaled. I don't know, like, they're designed for players who have experience with the game, especially at my point. Like, the bosses that I'm fighting now...
Well, yeah, so...
The bosses that I'm fighting now are level 80 bosses. And because
they're actually meant where... Oh, sorry.
It's alright, I was just going to say, they're the level 80 bosses, and I've had to do all the bosses from level 1 to level 80, and they've all ramped up in difficulty. Like, the first bosses were pretty fucking much the same as, like, the Mook enemies that I'm fighting now. But, like, not only that, but Square Enix adds content that is disproportionately difficult to appease to the top 1% of players who want to learn ridiculously difficult content. And I'm worried that I am absolutely one of those players. I'm not very good at it, don't judge me. But, like, I am absolutely one of those players, right? But, you know, that would be a very, very bad thing to let the influence of the difficult... Fucking grinder. It'd be bad to let the influence of the incredibly difficult content for Final Fantasy XIV let that influence
like,
a casual RPG.
You don't want your bosses that difficult, so you want a good balance.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, because, just like, with those videos on the Fantasy 14 bosses we were talking about earlier, like, I suppose those bosses are so hard that you require to watch a video and then learn the muscle memory just to do it.
Yes,
so it
exactly.
Is literally, it's more than an average game experience, which
that's partially why it only appeals to the top 1%, because it asks a lot of you. And I feel like, even though Undertale asks a lot of you, it doesn't, like, you know, do that from a difficult sense unless you opt into it in the optional content. And that's something, you know, as well, is that the really, really difficult fights, you know, True Undyne and the final boss, it's also optional content.
No.
So I suppose that's also a point. I think we totally can make content that is that difficult, and we just put it as optional content.
Well, yeah, that's probably the best way. Because doing a challenge via optional things is it's a perfect way to get people drawn into a game. It's what Pokemon kind of used to do before they took a post game out entirely in the latest generations.
Ooh, salty.
Well, I wouldn't say entirely, but it's significantly reduced.
Yeah.
You don't have battle frontiers to conquer anymore.
I should actually do something in this game instead of just running back and forth. This is terrible gameplay for people to watch. Holy shit. There's studies done on people who try to do something and talk, and it literally just goes terribly. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, I'd imagine different people are good at those better than... I really weren't that badly. Some people are better at this stuff than others. I'm really bad at it, if you want to put me into account.
We already know, Patrick. Trust me.
I've just got a single core processor. Some people are lucky enough to have...
Oh god, here we go.
But yeah, so... But the thing is, like... A lot of really good RPGs have, what you could say, optional content, where they're not only extra things for a player to explore,
they're also a spike in difficulty.
Test the skills that you learn from the main campaign and bring them up further.
Well, they test your skills if they're not Final Fantasy. Because if they're not Final Fantasy XIV, I mean Final Fantasy in general. Because if they're Final Fantasy in general, they are just, here's what you've been doing, but it's harder. Alright, I just realized that what
Final Fantasy always had that, like, with
realized
from 9, was he basically a normal boss but at 1,000,000 HP?
No, okay. I realize that what I just said literally just means the exact same thing that we said, but I said it in a mocking tone. What I mean is, it's the same thing as from the original game, but it has more health! There we go, that's what I should be saying in a mocking
So
way.
it's like, well, is Ozma an example of that? I don't
Ozma's
know.
almost an example of a good boss, because Ozma will specifically adapt to your team's strategy.
Oh, okay. What about though? What about
A
those?
fantastic
Oh, I know.
example, is the Adamantoids from Final Fantasy 15.
Oh, that's right. You showed me that once, where you
Yeah,
just kept wailing at him like
a boss whose entire
slash slash
a boss
slash
whose entire
15 minutes.
strategy a boss whose entire strategy is standing in his armpit for 20 minutes holding circle.
Yeah. Yeah. So well, yeah,
So
he's not actually testing your skills at this
he's
stage.
testing.
It's not making you think harder. It's just making you play longer
Yeah,
and have more items. And that's not actually very good.
there's like the line from Egoraptor's fucking sequelitis that I could like almost quote here. It's not testing your ability to think, but to wait.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he's kind of
So,
right. Though that's in a different context. But still.
you know, it works just like, lessons in a school. Like, the optional content should be considered like an extension version of the course. You use the skills you've already learned to apply something better with it.
So
And
how do we make this core then interesting? Because I really don't want to just have bosses that are all getting slightly more and more HP. And some of the coolest bosses in Final Fantasy X, which is is my favorite Final Fantasy, some of the bosses in that start to emulate that. You haven't gotten that far, but there's
I only literally just started Final Fantasy X once, so I haven't played it since.
so there's a boss
I don't
while
know.
you're on the airship that
Yeah.
will do an incredibly powerful attack if you stay on the when you're fighting him. You're on the airship and he's flying beside it. There's a boss
Yes.
on that boss, right? If you stay too close to him, if you don't tell the person driving the airship to like pull the airship away, it's definitely Sid. Don't worry, that's not a spoiler.
Yeah.
He will do a very, very powerful attack. I think I've never even let him do it because it was just natural to me to like periodically push him away from us so he doesn't, fuck my steez.
Yeah.
And likewise, there's another boss later on in the game, or maybe it was earlier, where instead of just being on one half of the screen as Final Fantasy fights are wont to do, your three characters are situated on 3 of 6 hexagonal platforms spaced around periodically around a boss, and he would occasionally do an attack where a character would explode and deal damage to themselves and anyone on the adjacent platform. Or maybe he would swing his arm and attack everyone in a cone in front of him. Like, so if you have everyone spread out, he would only hit one person. But if you had any, like, the idea
If you have
is,
them all in a group.
yeah, if you had them right next, like in a line, like you usually do, all 3 of them would get hit.
Putting all your eggs in one basket.
Like, these are really cool fights because they start making these mechanics about survivability and, like, money. That's just really interesting to me. I've gone back to running back and forth again. Fucking hell. So yeah, like I really wanna make a game that, it's more interesting than just every single.
Those ideas.
Yeah, it's more interesting than just every single boss is fucking, more HP and hits harder than the last one. Like,
Well, I do think that part of this comes from the general game's mechanics. Even if you just don't think about the bosses, it needs a big library of mechanics and many things to do, so that you can do a lot of things smarter.
exactly.
And some some
smarter, not
mechanics
harder.
of RPGs are deeper than others. So, yes, and I hate to bring up Pokemon too much, but
No, you
Pokemon
bring up
has
Pokemon
at
if you
least...
want it.
Yeah, but Pokemon has at least... Well, if done properly, which it has done sometimes, especially in some, in some Battle Frontier battles where, because it was very wide, just library of moves and different abilities and strategies. You could, and some what you could say bosses in Pokemon they didn't even have better stats because up until Generation 7, you didn't even have such thing as a quote-unquote boss Pokemon. They had the same, similar stats to any other of the same species. They just had better moves and a better AI to better utilize those moves to hit weaknesses and whatnot. So
Indeed.
That's at least one part of the equation. To do that, you would need a rather large library of things, but also different ways to use those concepts. And I think, just as you were saying with Undertale and Final Fantasy XIV, that is another way. Like it shows ways on how you can use that environment differently. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can be smarter at that same thing. It's all about fighting smart and harder. And so, even though Pokemon has had a mixed success with making particularly hard gym leaders, when it did succeed, it was all because it had a good AI, with well-raised Pokemon moves, and they would keep killing your team not because they had a billion HP, but because they kept using super effective moves that would squash you over.
Yeah, but unfortunately, because of the way Pokemon's designed, that still does just end up being a statistical difference and nothing more. That's the downside to it.
Yeah, well, that's true. But yeah, it is a.
It is still good. Like, it's an absolute step in the right direction.
Well, yeah, it's not the full answer, but if you think of it about the fighting smarter aspect, it is a example of what you can do. And I would imagine that a good boss can even still have some better stats, but just not.
Oh yeah, of course. I don't feel like a boss. The bosses definitely should have more stats.
Yeah, but grinding isn't the one thing you need to do to overcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's. I'm not that great at coming up with new concepts, to be honest.
Yeah, no, so I'm not asking for that. Like, there's no way we could.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes,
there is,
or
obviously.
At least now.
Yeah, there's no way we could out of the blue.
Yeah. And I'd imagine, nowadays, now that the RPG genre is what we're talking about, but also basically every other genre, it's been so established now that the only way you can really come up with new ideas is to know about a lot of other games and synthesize to come up with a new spin on
Yeah,
things.
exactly.
Gaming, just right now, at the moment, gaming is at its phase where it's not really new anymore, and it's about the first time it's up to that. Because, 20 years ago, gaming was just 25 years old. People were still learning what it was with the new hardware. This last decade has probably been the first time where, other than some notable exceptions, but even Undertale, which was sort of the first real injection of ideas, all it really did take, it works a lot like just a general RPG, but it just synthesized a lot of new ideas into it. It actually works a bit like how academia does, which is a really weird comparison. But
what's academia?
Like academic work, like history, for example.
Yeah, okay. I thought you were
where you take a concept, you combine it with another one, and then make a new concept with it. You don't come up with something out of blue. Whereas back in the 1980s, concepts like a platformer, not quite coming out of the blue, but they were being invented without much to draw from. And a lot of it just came from what the hardware could do at the time.
Oh my god, Patrick, I'm going to make Deus a platformer.
Are you actually being serious?
No! Oh my god.
Yeah. Anyway,
But yeah.
But no, yeah.
I really want to make bosses more interesting.
Yeah, so I think if we think the way, if on the sort of lines on how Undertale's system came to be, he basically got, a bit of some ideas off a top-down shooter, or look, what are those? What's the genre called where you're, like those 2D games where you're like in a plane, you're shooting and moving around? I can't
Uh,
remember.
I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Like, I suppose just shooting games? Like,
Well, no, not like. Well, yeah, it's. I don't know what it actually is. I'm going to sound like an idiot here, but the well, I guess he got some ideas from that and then added it to the turn-based system of RPGs, and it was a really natural fit. So that is one way we could come up with an idea for that, mix 2, 3, or more ideas together.
yeah.
And of course, the other thing Toby added to the RPG genre was the morality side to it. That's more a narrative. Well, not entirely, because there's the whole spare mechanic and negotiation mechanic, of course. So it is a mechanical thing, actually.
Yeah.
The morality thing was also another thing he mixed into the RPG recipe. So to do something innovative now, we need to mix things together because you can't really come up with anything out of the blue.
Yeah. No, it's very, very rare these days, if at all completely unprecedented, to find unique gameplay.
And even cases like Undertale are rare these days because I guess now we've got this era of nostalgia where, well, you've got the NES and SNES Classic now and all that, and then Sony's going into it and going, oh, let's do the PlayStation Classic, and
Yeah.
so right now it's very stale on ideas because older people who grew up with video games, now that they're all rich, companies are just wanting to capitalize on it by going back to tried and true formulas. Sonic Mania is a classic example of that. It's a great game, but it
it's
doesn't
not
actually
innovative.
do anything to
Yeah.
the Sonic franchise.
It's not innovative in the slightest.
It did add a few ideas from other Sonic games. But it's more a refinement rather than a new concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate thing if you want a classic Sonic game. And they were being even really conservative with that because they had to add in all the old zones in. They could have at least made more new zones, but that's just fine. So even though Undertale isn't a completely new invention, it's just a mix of things that worked out very well.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't even see many of those, and you generally see more of them in indie games than AAA's, because AAA is just like capitalizing on something that works. That's how capitalism functions.
Yeah, well, they're also terrified of innovation because,
Because it could be, well, yeah, if you think of it in investment terms, if it flops, then you're basically wasting money into something that didn't work.
Exactly.
It's basically the same thing as buying a new property and then the prices fall down. So when you sell it at a loss. It's literally the same thing.
Yeah, house flipping, but you fucked
So
up.
that's why Ubisoft is releasing an Assassin's Creed every single year that isn't much different. And same with Call of Duty, same with Pokemon, same with practically everything, actually. Because, yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you just do a similar thing, do some mixing of ideas, which is just about the best thing possible anyway, it could still be quite a unique thing that could bring inspiration.
Oh, absolutely.
Just because of how rare it is.
And because of that, I do actually kind of have an idea, right? My dilemma was, what is the balance between actively moving your character to deal with mechanics and, like, passively like having the time to play an RPG in amidst the mechanics, right?
Yeah.
Part of the
Because
struggle-
you're talking about how like
Part of the struggle for Final
like-
Fantasy XIV's difficult bosses is not just doing the mechanics. That's actually relatively easy. Stand here, wait, stand there, wait, stand there, wait, stand here, wait. It's involving your rotation of personal abilities, which often require you not to move or require you to be within melee distance of the boss. Constantly having those uptime, or as much as constantly as you can, so that you can kill the boss, because all the Final Fantasy XIV super bosses have what's known as a hard enrage timer, which is like at a certain point in the boss, they will just fucking kill you. Like,
Yeah.
they will be like, you've taken too long. Like that.
Oh, right. So you have to continue moving all the time.
No, not
basically.
continue moving. You have to continue DP. I mean, you do have to continue moving, but you have to continue
Like, you have to
DPSing.
continue doing something.
You have to continue damaging them. You have to kill them
Yeah.
before they reach that hard enrage timer.
Yeah,
But
so
you have to
so
kill
you
them
can't just
while
spend
contending.
2 minutes dodging all their attacks and not doing anything.
Yeah,
to
you
them.
have to constantly be DPSing them while you spend that 2 minutes dodging attacks.
Yeah, right.
So, like, the...
So you're saying that you don't want that in your idea?
I think I do, that's the thing. Not that
Oh,
to that
right.
extreme, obviously. I mean, not to that extreme
Yeah.
except for optional content. But I want... I really like the idea of balancing your position and your abilities. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think about balancing your position and your abilities is tactical games, you know.
Well, yeah, because they're kind of a similar thing, just turn-based and more slower.
Yeah, that's the exact downside, in my opinion at least. It's not that I don't like slow games, but, like, I have never envisioned, like, Deus to be a slow game.
Well, that's the thing too. Tactical games are also very hard to pull off in the whole like RPG things where you're exploring an area, you go into a random encounter.
Oh yeah, random encounters
those filled
fucking...
with tactical battles will be slow as it'll make Final Fantasy IX look like a Formula One.
Yeah, randomized fights in tactical RPGs fucking suck. Like, they are
that's
the
why
worst thing.
that's why no tactical RPG has those.
No, they do. They
That's
do.
all
Final Fantasy
great.
Tactics is like Final Fantasy Tactics, which is probably one of the world's best known tactical RPGs, is full of random encounters.
Oh, okay.
The only other game
I've
that you're
only-
thinking of is Disgaea. I know you're about to say that,
Yeah,
and
because it just
Disgaea
has
does not.
It just
because
has the stages, and you just complete the stage
Yeah.
by eliminating the enemies.
Disgaea is entirely mission based, so yeah, no, it doesn't. But yeah, Final Fantasy
Oh,
Tactics.
so Tactics actually does that? I didn't know.
Yes, Tactics is
Well, there you go.
really
Yeah, so that
fucking
would
slow.
make,
just
that'd make
because of
Final Fantasy IX look like a speedy hedgehog.
Yeah, it's, well, what kind of hedgehog?
Yeah.
Meow.
Yeah. Actually, you probably did see Game Theory's video that this movie Sonic is actually extremely fast, faster than game Sonic. Did you see that?
No, and I really don't want to.
Fair enough. But,
Movie Sonic makes
was-
my skin crawl.
well, he was saying that due to the footage in the movie, which, he does look pretty fast, he's actually way faster than game Sonic.
Yeah, I figured
So-
as much.
So, in terms of pure speed, saying movie Sonic is actually not an insult. But anyway,
Making me think of Movie Sonic is an insult.
I wonder what he'll look like when they do him up,
Giggity?
when they reveal him with the done-up thing, since they've now promised to redo his design.
Yeah.
Anyway, back onto the topic. So,
Well, I was thinking, yeah, how
there
I
is
can...
also... the mystery
No,
dungeon.
Patrick, you're literally about to say what I was thinking of. Right? When I
Hmm.
was thinking of tactical games that were fast, the first thing I thought of was the Mystery Dungeon games.
Now, Mystery Dungeon in general, and there's
Sorry, say that again.
oh,
You cut out a second. Mystery Dungeon in
mystery
general.
dungeon general type games, which, well, there's a lot more than just Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. There was that. What was that one you had on the PS4 that you showed me once?
I don't remember.
Oh, it's that one where you're not in a labyrinth, but you're progressing through this desert. I can't remember.
Me neither.
Anyway, sure you can find it somewhere, but there are actually a lot of Mystery Dungeon games. There's stuff like Etrian Mystery Dungeon, which Atlas has made, which is an extension of the Etrian Odyssey series.
Well, is it though?
Yes,
Because what kind of fights do you get into? You get into turn-based fights.
Well, yeah.
You just happen to explore
no, Etrian. Well, there's no. That's the mainstream Etrian Odyssey. I'm talking about Etrian Mystery Dungeon, which is basically a mystery dungeon game with the Etrian Odyssey paint on top.
Right.
So there's a lot of them. It's probably not actually a very big game.
So Etrian Odyssey plays like Mystery Dungeon, where enemies just roam the corridors around with you.
Well, yeah, Etrian Mystery Dungeon plays like a Mystery Dungeon game. And but yeah, Etrian Odyssey, I'd assume it developed from the Mystery Dungeon style, where you just navigate the maze and go into
you don't know?
They just... Well, yeah, I don't know, because the original one came out on the DS.
Ooh.
So they've got heaps for both the DS and the 3DS. And then they spun off Etrian Odyssey with a classical style Etrian Mystery Dungeon.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about, Mystery Dungeon.
Yeah, so we got into that. So there's a lot of Mystery Dungeon games, so you can think about that. The only problem is, I don't know if a Mystery Dungeon game can really deliver that idea, as in, using an interesting mechanic to, like, say, dodge a boss's attack or whatnot.
I totally think you could. You just move your character out of the way.
But I think, though, the turn-based thing makes it a problem, because when you go to, say, a boss in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, which is the only Mystery Dungeon game I've played a lot, because you're not really exploring around the dungeon, you're just fighting the boss. All you really do is next to the boss.
Right, but that's something you could very easily change.
And also, I guess you could have a boss arena with obstacles, and then you could give them more strategic, more cleverly thought out attacks that have very different area coverage or something.
See, now here's where things get interesting, right? Let's just for a second say we disband with the grid, right?
Yeah.
And we just have characters move based on an exact location, right?
Yeah.
And then let's also say that things are not turn-based. Suddenly we have Final Fantasy XIV. I just blew your fucking mind. Final Fantasy XIV is a mystery dungeon game without the grid or the turn-based.
Although the only difference is that the enemies can move when you're not moving.
Can they?
In Final Fantasy XIV, I'd imagine. I mean, the boss doesn't just do nothing if you do nothing.
Oh yeah, of course. But the thing is, if I ever want to put this game on
format, if you sit there doing nothing, the boss will also do nothing.
If I ever wanted to play this game multiplayer, then things moving without your without your specified consent might be the normality.
Yeah. I don't know. It's but yeah, I don't think it's.
But as much as I was saying that as a joke, that is legitimate.
Yeah.
Like this game, the more and more we talk about bridging the gap between Final Fantasy XIV style mechanics and a mystery dungeon, the more and more we're just making Final Fantasy mystery dungeon into Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Right?
So they're both generally very compatible anyway. It's just like Mystery Dungeon is like a turn-based version
Yeah, and also specifically grid-based in that position.
Yeah.
Though remember, you
Well,
had the idea for the game that you wanted to make that was a Mystery Dungeon style game, but it wasn't grid-based.
Well, yeah, there was didn't you actually have a game that already did that? Where
Yeah, it was a smaller game. It was like not very well known, and I feel bad because you were like, I'm gonna make a Mystery Dungeon game without the grid, and it's so unique, and I was like, it's been done, and you were like, oh. You like actually got kind of upset because I told you that it wasn't your idea first. But
well, you know, I'd imagine it would have clicked on someone else before me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not that hard to think of, really.
The thing is,
What
right?
if you take the grid and take the grid out?
The thing is, right? Fucking like having a grid in a strategy RPG, even a much quicker one like Mystery Dungeon, is synonymous with having a turn, because a space on the field can be like walking a space on the field.
You can either move a space or attack or use an item.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like having no grid is synonymous with not having a turn based, and having the amount of space move and the attacks you do be like asymmetrical.
Yeah.
It is totally possible to have like space on the field that you move be more determined based on your speed or something, and still make it a turn-based game. I don't know if I want a turn-based game, but like, you know.
Well, you're more attracted to the Dissidia / Final Fantasy XV style now, aren't you?
Yeah.
So yeah. So you'd like something more action-based.
I want to consider. I want to consider
if you
other
take
people who
turns
play
out entirely. You just get Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, I want to consider other players though. Like, this is not just about what I want. Like, this is not just. I don't want to just make the kind of game that I want to make. I want to make the kind of game that other people will play as well. And like maybe consorting to you about that is not the best idea, right? Like maybe you don't represent the majority of players out there, but you've told me,
because I'm just a weirdo.
You've told me that you want to play turn-based games. Like, you prefer turn-based games, and you're not the only one.
Slow. Yeah.
You're not the only one though. Like, so many people's criticisms of the footage of the new Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
Is just why don't
a new Final Fantasy game?
Yeah, the remake of 7. So many people's criticisms of that is just why don't they just remake Final Fantasy 7? It'd be so easy.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'd imagine, well, as you were saying, this remake isn't so much a remake anymore, it's more reimagining the game set. So you can even technically give it a different identity than the original game.
It already kind of does at this point.
Yeah, so I guess then the two, in a way, would complement each other. But the original would still have its place, which would, in a way, be kind of to the original. But, yeah. But yeah, I guess a lot of people, when they were thinking of the remake, were expecting, like, Final Fantasy VII mechanics, but improved, possibly deeper, and with high-definition graphics.
Yeah.
Which is what most remakes turn out to be.
But they're completely throwing it out in terms of action favor combat, and so many people in Final Fantasy is like fandoms are just complaining that all they want is
all they want is a higher fidelity Final Fantasy VII that can tell its story in more interesting ways than just text.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I could imagine that a lot of Final Fantasy fans would not actually like this new game, and that most of the game's audience would actually be like the newcomers who maybe have heard of Final Fantasy VII, the original, didn't play it. So yeah, very interesting. I've got something
Yeah, go on, hit me.
what on the on this thing, and I don't know how well I'd explain it. I could completely stuff it up
Yeah,
explaining it.
just try.
You would even know, but say, this could bring a lot of depth in. But if it's somewhat turn-based, right, but there's no grid, and in each character's turn they could move a distance within a circle around them, and this circle depends on stats. So some characters could have better maneuverability, thus
So
much farther.
that's how the game that I was
Is that
telling
how
you.
that game works?
Yes.
That game,
Yeah, that is how
Right.
that works.
Does that game also? So does it? Is it a bit like strategy RPGs where you can move in that circle and then attack, do the attack command?
Well, Disgaea could do
what-
that, remember? Disgaea and...
Well, yeah, I know. But did it have that same concept where you could do that?
It was
Yeah.
made by the same developers of Disgaea, so yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We go. Oh, okay, yeah. I really don't remember that game much.
No, I never told you or showed you about it. I have no idea what it's called, but it might be the La Pucelle series, which is like a side
Yeah.
series whose characters have had cameos in Disgaea, but I could be wrong about that.
Even though it's already been done, I think a system like that is open to so many possibilities, because you could have so many different things, just even based on the movement area alone. And then, you could even have teleporting characters that could move to a space outside of their circles.
That actually, that just made me fucking super smile, thinking of, characters who could teleport having easier times with the mechanics, but, how do you balance that? There's a reason why no one in Final Fantasy XIV can fucking teleport.
Yeah.
Actually, what am I saying? That's not entirely true. My character has a dash forward and a backflip. The Dragoon has a backflip. They have, a few. The Ranger has a backflip. The fucking Dancer has 3 consecutive dashes that they don't even have to lock onto an enemy to do. It's not a teleport, and I think that's fine. I think that we could balance a teleport.
Maybe things like teleporting could have consequences, like they take a lot of MP, or they don't enable you to attack the turn.
Well, yeah, teleport would be an action. It wouldn't be a move.
Yeah.
It would be a last
could leave you wide open.
Yeah.
Or maybe,
Ooh, careful.
there could be some possible workarounds.
I also really, really like Final Fantasy XII, and the idea of commanding the rest of your party through a system of conditional AI requests.
That system's almost too good. The fact that they could pull it off on PS2 was impressive.
Yeah, exactly.
It showed how much money Square Enix had to dump in the game. It's Persona 3, which came out in the same year. No offense to Persona fans,
But rip.
but it looked archaic in comparison just because Square Enix had dumped a load of money to make that game possible. They're even considering things like multiplayer, but PS2 just wasn't.
Yeah.
Scrap.
But,
So
multiplayer...
it really was a hardware marvel at the time.
But the idea why I'm bringing this up is because only having to control your main character, and conditionally being able to pick which main character you play as Final Fantasy XIII, would be fantastic, because it means you can make controlling your one main character 3 times as complex.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't have to control 3 separate characters.
You could really just focus on the main character and have the others, don't have to worry about 5 others.
I mean, you control them through your setup of intelligent commands.
Through that. What's that system?
It's the Gambit system.
Gambit system. So you control them, yeah.
Except
so
we wouldn't be able to call it the Gambit system.
In a way, you're manually controlling. You're not just doing it. You're not doing it live.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I imagine though that would still be problems. People might just really want to manually control the character, at least want an option. but I guess
it wouldn't be
well, in Final
feasibly
Fantasy
possible
12's
in
case,
that condition.
well, yeah, it wouldn't even be possible because like it's like 5 based. So unless you have 3 pairs of hands and 3 controllers.
Well, that's exactly it, right? Like, I feel like you'd be able to switch whichever character you want to whichever character you want at any time. You can do that in 12, but
yeah,
see, the complicated mechanics I'm talking about aren't coming from playing a character that's complicated. They're coming from the fact that if all you have to do is focus on one character, then you can fucking very easily make bosses more complicated. The interesting thing is, how do you develop your allies into making them not Mary Sues when it comes to mechanics without making that unfair? Like, how do you make an AI character fail a mechanic, which will always be to your detriment, without making it feel like the computer just decided you didn't want to win today? That's a very complicated...
I think the thing with the Gambit system was that probably the only thing that could stop it is the abilities of the player. So if you were a very good player, you could just make a really good Gambit system, like kick everyone's butts.
Yeah, but the difference is the Gambit system neither takes into account for, nor the game even attempts to implement in order to take account for, a system where your physical position on the battlefield determines whether you survive an attack or not, right?
Well, that's true, because Gambit,
that's what I'm talking about.
Like Final Fantasy XII system isn't actually that much about it.
It's literally just if the enemy's on this health.
Selecting which enemy to choose, one, and then B, picking items, that's it.
Yeah. So, making a system where Final Fantasy XII's system can exist to control your allies, where Final Fantasy XIV's system can exist to, or Undertale's system can exist to entertain the idea of complicated and intrinsically difficult boss fights.
Yeah, it actually really puts movement into the battle.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy XII just adds battles to a live.
Yeah, even
3D.
Yeah. I'd really love to see... Well, the thing is, right, Final Fantasy XII is supposed to feel like an MMORPG because they were originally making it to be a single-player MMORPG, and it still kind of feels like that. That was, like, the design doc when going into Final Fantasy XII, or something to the sort.
Yeah. Actually, something comes to mind. What about the Tales series?
The Tales series is also really interesting because it totally encapsulates moving on the battlefield, not for the sake of...
to dodge an attack.
Yeah, it's not for the sake of from enemy mechanics, but it'd be very easy to implement. But at that point, right, Tales is just a step away from being Final Fantasy XIV. The thing is, Tales isn't very good for having lots of different skills, combat abilities.
Oh yeah, like
that's always something I've wanted in Final Fantasy. That's always something I've wanted in Deus. Having lots of different skills that you can, amass, right?
And what I would imagine too, as I was saying before, if you're to have a better chance of making a good boss that fights smarter rather than harder, you're having a bigger library of skills, I think, is important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that then comes at an impasse with Tales.
I still think we could do it, though. Tales has a lot of skills. Like, just not nearly as many as I was hoping for. If I was
not
being
it doesn't have a huge library like Pokemon.
Well, the other thing is Tails' skills. The other thing, it's, not the best to compare Pokemon to it. Because Pokemon, you're distinctly fighting things that are equal to yourself. You've already mentioned this. There are no bosses. Yeah. You're just fighting another person's...
Generation 7.
Yeah, you're just fighting another person's Pokemon. Whereas in games like Tales and in games like Final Fantasy, you're distinctly fighting things that are different to you. So you can't develop new moves.
Because to a lot of Tales' bosses, like, they have, like, heaps more HP and a lot of it just wailing at them.
Well, like in Pokemon, you can't develop new moves exclusive for the Pokemon when used by fucking Jim the trainer, right? That would just be unfair. The
Yeah,
whole point of Pokemon is that you can get all the Pokemon.
yeah.
Um,
Not short sword and shield. You can't.
yeah, that was the idea. But that is the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And so like that doesn't really mesh with the idea of having an RPG where you're not like I'm not fighting other recruitable players in Deus, like, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
You've
that
got a set party that you'll get 8 of.
yeah. So I don't
But
think
still,
I don't think we'll be lacking for mechanics we can give to the bosses.
well, yeah, you could.
We can.
What you could,
The thing is, we
well,
have the
you could
power
make
to
each
create
individual
mechanics.
Party. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We have the
You
power
could
to.
make the. I'll let you talk, then I'll talk.
Well, the point you're trying to make is, well, in Pokemon, because you can't make new moves for enemy Pokemon, you have to make them better by being smarter. But in fucking Final Fantasy or in Deus, we can. Because, you know, we're not limited to the same moves that a player is allowed to use. Like, we could
So,
totally
the
just
other
make a
thing
new
too
move.
is- You could still potentially have a large library of skills if you make each of the party members you're going to have very flexible.
Well, that's part of it. But,
Kind of like the way the materia system worked, though you could even make it deeper than that.
yeah, it's always been a struggle for me to make, or to think of systems that I would like to use when it comes to characters and their growth. Because I've really started to like the way Final Fantasy XIV does it as well. Have you noticed I've been a bit biased to that game?
Yeah, oh well. Everyone has their biases, but yes. It's like actually being talked about more than Pokemon fans. But yes.
So, Final Fantasy XIV, right? They have some pretty there's some pretty reliable patterns across all of the different classes, right? So there's like a few things you can always count on, right? There's these things called combo actions where you use one skill and then skill number 2 becomes ready, and then that skill becomes more powerful, skill number 2, and then you use skill number 2 and then skill number 3 becomes ready. And then you rotate back and forth between those 3 skills.
Yeah, true.
Wow, we all just died. So that's one of the things that you can rely on. And then another one is that you can rely on an additional HUD element to your regular HP and MP HUD element. So, let me explain how you play Red Mage, so that you can have some context, right?
See if I can track it.
Yeah, it's very easy, trust me. Red Mage has a variety of spells. I'm not going to go into their other intrinsic value because I don't need to. I'm only going to go into one of theirs, so anyone who watches this and is like, but what about you, Custer? Shut up.
I do remember the way the hotbar combat works, so...
Yeah, well, it's not hotbars specifically, but, like, Red Mage has a variety of skills, right? And each of these skills fill up one of 2 bars that sit next to your health and mana bar, right? All of the skills that are like stone and wind, they're like white magic damaging skills, right? And so they fill up the white mana bar. And all of the spells like fire and thunder, they're black magic damaging skills. And so they fill up the black mana bar. And when you fill both of these bars up to almost full, you don't have to get them completely full, you can unleash a very powerful melee combo on your enemy. And then that empties the bars. In addition to that, if you fill one bar up too much over the other one can't be filled up nearly as quickly until you bridge the gap a little bit. So playing Red Mage is a balance of filling red and white, black and white mana, you know, equally, right?
Yeah.
And so that makes Red Mage really interesting. It just makes playing this class interesting. At least more interesting than I have a list of skills from a menu and I will pick this one because it does the most damage. In Final Fantasy XIV, it's known as a rotation. It has a set of skills that you use in order to get the best DPS. You can't just sit there and use the best skill over and over again, because skills often have conditions, like you need to be facing against the bosses behind to use this skill, or you need to use the skill before this to use this skill, or you need to have a certain resource filled up to be able to use this skill. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Having all these different skills that have a really interesting condition to them makes the classes more interesting to play.
Yes.
And I think that that's another thing that RPGs don't do, but I'm worried how much of this is based on the idea that we're playing an MMO and so we expect that. Am I not allowed to make classes with interesting skills, with additional HUD elements that are unique to that class and unique to the class's mechanic? Simply because it's not an MMO? Yeah, exactly, right?
Well,
because all of this is very, very common in World of Warcraft too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it could be useful because it will make the battles more interesting, especially if you have very varied enemies, so you know to use the varied options against those and learn how to use them effectively. And I mean, you know, if you let yourself get contained by thinking, oh, that's only an MMO thing, then, you know, you won't be able to do innovations like, say, Toby Fox did.
Oh, I'm not containing my innovations because... Oh, I'm getting too much black mana now. I'm not containing my innovations because I'm
not saying you are.
No. I am, but I'm not doing it because, like, I feel like this only belongs in an MMO. I'm actually suggesting that the majority of the player base will feel that way and thus will dislike a game
made
with
so
those...
the hegemonic disadvantage.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I didn't pay for a single-player game so that it could play like an MMO, like, you know.
Yeah, no, now that you mention it, it is a thing, isn't it?
It's a complicated barrier to, like, you know, it's a tightrope.
Yeah, well, I think there could be two ways to overcome this. One, you could make the gameplay different enough so that it doesn't
directly reflect
so
an
that
MMO.
That will, yeah, but very similarly, it could also add a certain mechanic in. I don't know what it would be. I'm just thinking. I'm not thinking on how I'm thinking. What you could say, but if there's an extra mechanic that does make it interesting, so that they would be encouraged to do that.
What do you mean? Encouraged to do what? Now I am confused.
Encouraged to fight using the diverse tactics without making it ish.
Sure.
Yeah, no.
It's a complicated prospect, but I think... Like, it's... I love Final Fantasy XIV so much, and I know this could totally come off as just me saying, I want to make Final Fantasy XIV again. And maybe that is what I'm, like,
Maybe
thinking.
that is what you want to do, and you won't admit it.
Yeah, totally. I love this game so much, but I also love our characters, and I love the story we've been through and the story that we've constructed.
Maybe you could just develop a Final Fantasy XIV mod with its characters.
It's an MMO. Mods don't exist for MMOs.
Oh, well. You could hack the game, steal the engine, and then make a game like it. Not an MMO, but then again, you don't know how to program yet.
Yeah. And we're back to the start of the conversation.
See, that's why we haven't had no progress in all these years.
Oh my god, we don't move forward.
We figured it out.
Da 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 da. Oh, it actually,
And that, my friends, is the meaning of life.
I just did the fun victory theme when I finished the dungeon and the victory theme played. So, timing?
Perhaps the game is listening to you.
Make a copy of me! What? But
well,
yeah,
you're just getting a lot of legal jargon from Square Enix, so don't do that.
Final Fantasy 14 2.
Unless you never ever put it on the internet.
Yeah.
In which case they won't know, but they will know because of this video.
Oh no! What have I done? I've ruined my only chance at success!
But I think, well, it is interesting. I suppose what you're probably really itching to do is to, well, I guess not exactly make a copy of Final Fantasy XIV, but
develop
just
these
use
mechanics.
some of its ideas in something that's really nice and innovative.
Yeah, so, see, that's the thing, right?
Like,
so many mechanics, like you were saying, there's nothing original in gaming anymore, and there are so many mechanics in other games that, like, have been used over and over again.
It's all a mix and match of different things. That
but
then
no
makes...
one seems to pull from MMOs.
Yeah.
MMOs have gotten such a bad rap because...
I'm sure, like, given how RPG Final Fantasy XIV is, it really is just an RPG game
that you happen to play with... Yeah, it's just an RPG that you happen to play with 10 million other people.
I think the problem here isn't mixing the mechanics. The problem comes from the hegemonic advantage you were talking about there. Oh, I don't want to play an MMO!
Well, yeah, MMOs have gotten a lot of bad rep because when, 5 or 10 years ago, they were, like, the thing that everyone was making. Like, you've seen enough gaming news these days to, like, know about, fucking live services, right? Like, I can't say that.
Oh, yeah.
I can't say that without saying it like Jim Sterling.
Yeah, he says those things really well.
Yes. AAA gaming!
But, like with the new hot thing now is what they call surprise mechanics, which is actually loot boxes. So was it the new fad a few years ago, and so
everyone was making MMOs because
general consciousness.
Everything was making an MMO because the desire was to get people to play for as long as time as they could, and to get people to spend as much money as they could.
Yeah,
and obviously I don't want that. I want to produce a game that will be paid for once.
You want to make a single-player game that
well, I don't want to... So single player is not something I want to exclude. I'd love to be able to play this game with other people, and I'd love other people to be able to do it too.
Yeah, a non-MMO game just using a few ideas from MMOs.
Yeah, and I want people to pay for it once, and then they have the game.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Oh, Pat, that's... try not to do that.
Yeah, so the... Yeah, you're just thinking that, like, if
the
they
name
get this
MMO, like
of an MMO, then they'll just cringe.
It's like when people say they're a feminist these days. Like, maybe you're doing good, but you've got a terrible fucking, like...
Well, yeah, because...
Feminists
like,
are generally...
between, like, normal feminists and Tumblr feminists.
The terrible extremists. Or an even better example would be it's the difference. It's like when people talk about Final Fantasy 13 now. Final Fantasy 13 got such a bad rep.
Yeah, because 13 is like the black sheep now.
Yeah, but Final Fantasy Lightning Returns...
I can see why people don't enjoy it, but I do think, like with a lot of other internet-sourced hate, it gets... Well, it's a matter of perspective anyway, but it also just got proliferated because everyone else was hating it. And then because they have that expectation, they hate it too.
Yeah.
It was a very... Because I think the direction of 13, even though it was executed well enough, was just a really weird thing to do.
Well, the example I was pulling from
the background of Final Fantasy XII for one.
Well, the example I was pulling from that was actually Final Fantasy Lightning Returns, which is the third part of Final Fantasy XIII.
Yeah. That
Lightning
was
Returns.
Very different to the universe too,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah, and Lightning Returns is a fantastic game for its gameplay. Like, no one
Yeah.
is ever going to know that because they got sick of
Yeah,
Final
they were
Fantasy
like,
13
oh, it's
when...
not the same as the rest of
No,
them.
no, no, they got sick of Final Fantasy 13 when it came out, and 13.2 just pissed them off even more. So when the third sequel
Yeah,
came out,
so
and it
they
was
didn't
actually
even
good...
bother to get Lightning Returns.
Yeah,
because
it's...
they didn't like 13.
Lightning Returns is a terrible story, to be fair. It sort of
Yes.
kicks the rest of the Final Fantasy 13 story in the balls.
Yes, when he's saying that it's like it doesn't even really have much of a story. It's just like, hey, I'm Lightning. I'm here to save the world, and that's it.
I'm Lightning, and God has told me to take everyone's souls and put them on the new world. Also, he took my emotions away for reasons.
Hey, yeah, less budget to make facial expressions.
Well, exactly. We can't have Lightning's eyebrows go above 2 inches of her face. They would reveal the broken facial texture underneath there.
So yeah, it was. You liked it because of its gameplay.
Yeah, its gameplay is
No one got to
fantastic.
experience it.
Its
because of
gameplay is
the-
ridiculously innovative for its time. Its gameplay turned ATB on its head and also turned classes and jobs on its head. You know Final Fantasy X-2, where there's dress spheres, where you can change a different class, but they're also visually different, like the
Yeah,
aesthetic. The aesthetic is that you're playing dress up, but also
It's as
you've
much
got
a costume party as it is a class system.
Final Fantasy Lightning Returns took that to the extreme. You could create your own costumes. There's like hundreds of pieces of different visual armor and equipment to put
So
on.
did they get Final Fantasy X-2 and inject steroids into it?
Well, yeah, sort of. Let me finish. Like, Final Fantasy 13 is crazy. There's, like, hundreds of pieces of different armor that you can equip that all have base abilities, as well as weapons and shields. And you can cross-match all these different pieces of equipment, so you don't have to have the same set equipped on every single piece. And they have empty slots of abilities, so you can just put more abilities on, and they're all, like, upgradable. And all of the equipment is dyeable, so you can change the colors, so you don't just have to stick with the color scheme that you start with. In the game...
Yeah, so that's a really deep system that you can just make
Oh,
any
yeah.
customization on.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. But because it was hidden behind the ephemeral barrier of Final Fantasy 13 and 13.2...
So the fact that it was a Final Fantasy 13 game ruined it.
It destroyed it,
For
exactly.
many people. So if it was a Final Fantasy spin-off game that didn't have Lightning on it,
Oh, yeah,
then
100%.
it
I
probably
think it would
sold
have
about
rocked.
5 times as much.
I think it would have rocked the market if it came out as a non-mainline Final Fantasy game, because it was so interesting. And there are other Final Fantasy non-mainline games that have come out that have rocked the market because they've been so interesting. Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy Dissidia, Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm, Final Fantasy what is it? Dissidia Tactics. What's the fucking one that's the sequel to 7? Or prequel?
Crisis Core.
That's it, Final Fantasy Crisis Core. Like, all of these games are fucking, like, from what I understand, both critically and communally applauded for the way that they play.
Yeah.
And
So if it
Tactics,
was released with something like that, it would be the next Dissidia
yeah, it would be
in
fantastic.
the game.
But it had the
series.
name Final Fantasy 13. And that's also...
Yes.
Final Fantasy 15 was going to be part of a series of Final Fantasy
That's right,
13
it was
related
13
games.
Versus, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That
13...
made it its own thing.
Final Fantasy Type O, or Type 0, was also going to be a Final Fantasy...
That one.
Final
But
Fantasy Type 0 was
I-
going to be Final Fantasy 13 Agito, and Final Fantasy 15 was going to be Final Fantasy 13 Versus, and they were all going to be in the same universe.
Yeah, right. So before they changed, they would have also had lightning on them and all that.
Maybe not specifically, like her face or even
They
her
would have
character.
expanded on
but they would have been
They
in-
just would have expanded the universe that
Yeah.
it's in.
And Final Fantasy
Yeah.
Type 0 came out so late into the anti-Final Fantasy 13 crusade that it still does kind of expand on the universe. It's just expecting us to, believe that all the terms they're using, like l'Cie and Seath and all that kind of stuff, are terms that should be not rebranded, redefined specifically for that game. You know how, like, fucking, there are terms in Final Fantasy that often get different names across every game, like summons, aeons, eidolons, guardian forces, you know, etc. And, like, Seath in Final Fantasy Type O and Seath in Final Fantasy 13 are not the same, at least I think, question mark.
Yeah.
So, like, I definitely feel like there's a stigma that I can't make things that are like MMOs, because MMOs just got shat on so consistently for such a long period of time.
Yeah, so if you remind them too much that it's MMO-like, then it'll be like Final Fantasy.
Well, along with that, if I make a game that is visually, like, if I make a game that appeals to an MMO audience, the first thing they're going to think is
but
this
it's not an MMO, so
no.
It'll be between a...
No. If I make a game that appeals to an MMO audience, it'll be like, well, how much do I have to pay every month for this? Like, you know, because MMOs have a monthly recurring payment system, for a lot of them at least. And that's not how I want to do this, obviously. I don't want to make a monthly recurring payment. That's also a struggle. It's not something I've been thinking about as much. Stuff like that I would feel like it'd be important to think about if I had something in production. I clearly don't. But it is, you know... It's
still using your imagination as a graphics card at that stage.
Yeah.
At this stage. Yes. Yeah, no, I guess thinking up of a way to incorporate this correctly would take some time and possibly a light bulb moment.
Yeah, definitely. I've been thinking about it, though. So, the main questions I've got to think about, right, are, do we want to have a lot of skills, or do we want to have a few skills? I think regardless of how many skills we have...
ways you could use them.
I think regardless of how many skills we have, I want to have, like, an additional HUD element for each character. So, like, you know, not only do they... Like, so it's like an additional mechanic, additional resource for them to use, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so,
like, doesn't that sound cool? Like, maybe Elias could, like, store light whenever he gets hit by a magical attack, and then...
Well, kind of like how the different bars work in Smash. Like, yeah, I see that now.
Yeah.
That's... I'm thinking right, yeah.
That's how red mages work. They store the two types of mana, and then they get to use it in various different ways that generally involve a melee attack.
Yeah, and so you could use that in different ways, where if you store light for longer, you can make a more powerful attack, or do more in one turn, or...
Yeah, exactly.
Something. And then, Yeah, no, that's a possibility.
Like, I want to have that kind of HUD element either way. But, like, do we want lots of skills, or do we want a small amount of skills?
Well, yeah. I do suppose that if you're thinking about HUDs,
I'm not thinking about HUDs specifically, I'm just saying, like...
Well, yeah, but like... Yeah,
lots of skills and a small amount of skills is the difference between a Tales-style game and a game that plays with hotbars. That's what I'm getting at, right? Like, a Tales-style game works because it has a smaller selection of skills.
Yes.
A large selection of skills would have to be on a hotbar.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah. And a hotbar would be more obvious.
It would be more specifically MMO-like, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
And then the other question is, do we want it real-time or turn-based? I think I already know what you're going to say with that, though.
Yeah, I prefer turn-based, but...
Yeah.
Mine is only just one opinion from the Sea of Souls.
From the Sea of Souls? How desolate. I'm going to name an area in Deus the Sea of Souls.
Alright then.
And just have... And just fill it full of people complaining the game's not turn-based. Man, the action's too fast. I can't keep up.
I can't keep up, so I died, and now I'm in this sea of souls. All thanks to you.
Yup. um, but yeah, I feel like depending on what kind of game we want to make, those are where the fundamental questions come in, right? We make it more turn-based, and we can, you know, we make it more turn-based. Making it more turn-based makes it easier to have lots of skills as well. Right? But making it more turn-based makes it slower. Having less skills makes it easier to make it a more action-based game.
There's a correlation between speed and number of skills.
Oh, absolutely, because the amount of skills you have to pick from, you know.
Yeah.
Take up your time picking
because,
from them.
you know, if you're fighting in, like, a really, like, in a really real-time environment, most people wouldn't have the capacity to think, oh, which out of the 38 skills I got should I use?
I'm also, like, anticipating comments now on the video that are saying something like, but more skills aren't always, like, quantity isn't always quality. And, like, when I say more skills, I'm talking about, like, the amount Final Fantasy XIV has on a character compared to the amount Tales has on a character, right? Like, Tales, the Tales games have, like, 5 or 6, maybe 7. I don't know, I've never finished one. Maybe they get slightly more. Whereas Final Fantasy, generally speaking, has about, like, 30-ish at the top level.
There is one exception that I can think of, and that's a really far fling, but fighting games.
Oh, yeah. Fighting games are not...
You can have a lot of skills, but I don't know how transferable that is to an RPG.
It's not, trust me.
And
actually, I say that.
I mean, I can imagine there'd be some things that are transferable, such as maybe the way movement and dodging works, but you just have to make it... Because fighting games are incredibly... they're incredibly complicated.
They have a very, very high tier of entry.
Well, that's the thing too. You'd have to make it lower tier, and in order for a player to utilize all those 30 moves differently, they would need to be very high tier because you need to be very quick, have muscle memory. And
that's. I don't think
the game.
I don't feel like we can. I don't feel like we can take fighting games as an influence. It's a good idea though, but I don't feel like we can.
Yeah. But that's the only exception I can think of. That was practically what we were up to last time. We were saying the same things, like, yeah, we should totally do it this way, and then we don't know, we know how to do it, but not what to do.
Yeah. I feel like what to do would be start, like, self-educating. Like, you know, if I could start self-educating in some form of code, I could start providing examples to these things. You know, this wouldn't just be blind hearsay and ideas. These would be examples.
Yeah, that would be whether this can actually execute and is possible.
Yeah, feasible physical examples that we can have to, like, talk about.
It's not just up to imagination.
I feel like that'd be a step towards the right, but, you know, motivation, depression.
Yeah, motivation and depression. And, you know, well, assuming whether you want to learn programming yourself or take an official course, if you want to take an official course, that probably requires money.
Yeah, taking an official course, money, regulation, working on other people's time as opposed to my own. But at the same time, having a professional there that I can, like, talk to about anything I need to talk to them about.
Well, yeah, because they probably have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And, you know, probably more handy in general than talking to me. Tried and failed to learn programming at school.
I think you would have done it if you just had a better teacher. Not to, like, put redactor down or anything.
He was a bit of a...
He was a teacher that appealed to the quicker thinkers. I think if someone was willing to take it slow with you, I totally think you could get into it, because coding is your thing. It's purely logical. It, like, you know,
Well, that's the thing, but I was never like because coding is also very mathematical, and I
Mm.
mean, I wasn't that great at maths.
All right.
I could do maths decently, but not more than the average layman.
All right. I'll take that.
Um, but doesn't mean maybe I can learn a bit, but I really don't know at this stage.
Yeah, it's obviously
I
not your prerogative when you're in the middle of a uni course about history or some shit.
no, that's true. Um, yeah. Uh, anyway, um, yeah, I don't know. I guess you could maybe the best thing for you might be to really take it in the shallow end. I'm sure you've tried this already, but
I
like
have.
do some really easy things and then just keep building up from there by yourself.
Yeah, no, I have, and it's not that I can't do them. It is really just the motivation. It is 100%
Yeah.
just the motivation to keep
In
doing
which
them.
case, perhaps it's our answer to our entire problem. Long, you just need to get just keep on improving your motivational skills.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Kick the rocket off the ground. Blast the Saturn V off the ground before you can get to the moon.
Fucking hell, since when were you good at fucking inspirational fucking speeches? That was inspirational as fuck.
Thanks. Well, I don't know. Maybe it was a light bulb moment that we desperately needed in terms of game mechanics, not rhetoric.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, yeah, well, now that I think of it this way, inspiration first, then once you have the motivation first, that's what I should have said. Motivation first, then you'll get the movement to actually start to learn to program. Then once you get that, things might finally start flowing a bit. It's a multi-tiered chain.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and on that note, I should probably.
Yeah, this is
I
a good
guess we
talk.
might finish this because it's a good time to end.
This
And
is a
I've
good
only
talk.
got 1 hour before I go to bed because I need to wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning to finish my essay.
Fun.
Yes, I've got to do. Well, I'm not going to finish it tomorrow. I have to do it over 3 days before I leave. Leave
Understandable.
on my holiday. So, yeah, then I can have dinner and do stuff. And because if we just keep this going longer, we'll just be umming and erring.
Yeah, we've kind of exhausted all we want to say.
We've exhausted all our ideas. We'll see what we can do with the motivation, and I'll see if I can help you with any projects you might come up with in my spare time.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
that'd be really cool.
Well, I mean, it was a trouble for me to even scrape off getting to call you in the first place, so I don't know how well that's going to happen.
Hey, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah. So if you do come up with new ideas, yeah, then I guess we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. I'll see you soon then, I guess.
Alright, thanks for chatting.
Yeah, have fun. Don't crash.